Thanks, Peter. Seeing that at 7 o'clock, we'll bring the Board of Water Commissioners meeting. We'll begin with public participation. If there is any. Thank you, Peter.
Yeah, I'm here.
Mike.
Yes, Mike Burns, 19 Kylie Lane, water commission. I'm sorry, liaison from the water from the City Council to the Water Department. First, I guess this is all right. It's not going to be a violation here, but I want to thank everybody for the work you put in last 3 weeks on the bond issue. Especially Heather and Fran and Steve. I know it was a tough, time. We had there were many questions. You answered them all fine. And I just like to thank everybody, especially the Water Commission, for giving me that opportunity. And anything I can ever do, just let me know. So thanks again. You guys do wonderful work there.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mike. Very well said. Is there anyone else? Right, since no one's volunteering, we'll move on to the next agenda item, water study by Ty and Bond.
Yeah. Okay, so yeah, this is something that we feel needs to be done. It's time to be looked at. So we, with the help of Ty and Bond, have developed this rate evaluation for your consideration to help you make a decision. And I think as far as the presentation, turn it over, and Jen as well, turn it over to Mike and Jen, and let them present it and then go from there.
All right. Hello, everybody. My name is Mike Schrader. I'm with, excuse me, Ty and Bond, and I am an engineer, not an accountant, but I do most of my work these last 5 years has been with rate consulting. Excuse me, and I find it very interesting and rewarding, because I think it helps communities do what they need to do to not only to fund their capital programs and their operations, but also to try to match that to the needs of the community. And Fran, I'm sorry, I don't know you all well enough by face. Who's in the room with you?
Oh, okay, I'm sorry. We have Hannah, office manager, Joanna, the
Hi, Joanna.
analyst, myself, and Steve Fernandez, deputy of water. Hannah, you'll be able to do a screen, help them with screen share if you need to.
Yep, I'm going to do that right now.
Good.
Joanna, I'm not going to lie. I mostly just wanted to make sure that was you. So if I have any questions,
you can take over.
Okay, so I'm going to share my screen and I'm going to try this. So I don't know why this. All right, let me see if I can. It's always a challenge to see the people and what I'm sharing at the same time. So bear with me a second. So this is intended to be informative and somewhat informal. My goal when I do this work is that I want to support informed decision making by the board, and beyond that, it's data driven and transparent. So I've trimmed back the amount of detail to fit the format of the meeting. But if anybody has any questions, I can't see everybody, and especially in the room there, you guys are really small. So I may not notice, you know, a subtlety or whatnot. So please just speak up if you want, and I will pause, or we can take questions at the end and what have you. So let me just just bear with me a second here. Full screen. Yeah, it says full screen, but it's actually a little bit less. So,
It looks here, Mike.
Yeah, I think it looks okay, Mike.
okay, were you getting the bottom too? I wasn't sure.
Yeah.
Okay. So what we do is I want to go through a little bit of the process and the methodology, how we do things. And again, this is, you know, my goal. I'm going to present you with 3 different options or 3 different alternatives for rate structures. They all work, and it's just a matter of figuring out which one works best for the city. And I want to explain to you how we're doing it and what, you know, what goes into it, so that we can, like I said, my goal is that you completely understand what we're talking about and can, you know, decide what the differences are between these different alternatives. So when we look at water rates, there's 3 primary goals or principles. The first one is to recover the full cost of service. And I think you guys are doing that. What this means is that you're meeting all your requirements, and that's sort of the table ante I think most water systems do. But what I mean by that is that you're doing everything that you want to and you think you need to be doing beyond, you know, meeting your regulatory requirements. You're fully staffed, meaning that there's not, you know, openings that have been open for a very long time. And this, you know, it may not seem like it applies to you, and I really don't think it does, but these are sort of the standards. And, you know, there's quite a few systems out there where you find they haven't raised rates in a long time, that attrition starts to happen and things kind of start to go by the wayside. And of these 3, the most important is that you have a proactive repair and maintenance program or capital improvement program. So when we say recovers the full cost of service, it means to maintain the level of service for your customers, that 1, that you're required to by statute, and 2, that you want to meet. So the next one is to distribute costs equitably. An enterprise is a closed system. Mathematically, it's a net sum zero gain, meaning 2 things. I think of it as, you know, like I said, it's a closed system. So if you want one person or group of people or customers to pay less, other people have to pay more. And the reason I say that is because as we're thinking about this, you charge water rates, or you charge your customers for water to recover that cost of service, so that it's separate from the general fund and it's completely independent. And to do that, any rate structure will do, you know, just to meet that cost. So you could just divide the number of users and say, okay, we're each going to pay, you know, $100, whatever. And that could work, but it's not fair, or it's not equitable. And by that, we mean looking at the difference between residential and non-residential customers, between large households, or really large users versus small users. And then the difference between essential use and discretionary use, which in the, you know, in the real world is really irrigation. So we want to understand how the costs are distributed between your big water users and your not so big water users. And again, a simple rate structure, if it doesn't discern between, say, the usage, then you will unintentionally find yourself subsidizing large users being subsidized by small users if it's not a granular rate structure. And then lastly is the is that we want to provide revenue stability and resource protection. So we look at usage trends, which in Westfield has been very interesting. We'll talk a little bit about that. We talk about rate design, which is the sort of the heart of what we're doing. And then permit limits, which is usually a nod towards conservation. And I don't think that that's going to be a big, something's flashing here. Okay, are we good with the slides? Can everybody see the whole thing?
Mhm.
Down
Yes,
to the time button? Okay. So that's sort of the baseline for these things. And I understand that you're a water commission, so you're fully, used to talking about these kind of things, but I'd rather err on going over the basics and talking about things than leave something out. So the next, oops. Oh boy. There we go. So the next thing we looked at was your water use.
Mike, sorry to interrupt you, but we're only seeing screen one still.
Oh boy. Oh boy. Let's see. I'm gonna try. So it's not going backwards, forwards.
It's just stationary right where you began.
How about people that are remote? Anybody?
I only see the cover, Mike, and the most bottom text I can see is Board of Water Commissioners.
Oh, you know what? I'm
20th and
sorry.
Time
Okay,
bond
let's
border.
stop that. And I apologize. It is always a little tricky here. So let me,
Didn't
thank
pre-
you for saying that, by the way, because I would have just kept going. All right.
around.
Why? I am having just a little bit of trouble here. So, okay. So you. Presentation, and let me just back here. 1 second. Share screen. All right, let's try this.
Yep.
There we go.
So
That's
you-
much better.
So you didn't see this whole slide?
No,
No.
Sorry about that. So
First
the I don't know if I need to go through it again, but your full cost of service, distributing the costs equitably amongst the different types of users and the size of users, and then providing revenue stability and resource protection. So with any luck, we'll go backwards. Are you seeing a usage?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
So when we first started looking at this, water use is very interesting. It's different everywhere. I've looked at across the state, and for every system that's using less water, there's a system that's using more water. The crazy thing that is, it's often by about the same amount. It's up, 1.5%, 2% is usually the change. And then some are just kind of, chugging along in the middle. Where Westfield is interesting is that there was a marked decrease over the last 3 years, which, again, we see that it can happen. There's all kinds of reasons for water use to go down. What's really interesting here is that the reason was that the wells were offline because of the PFAS issue. So it was an artificially constrained usage. So those wells were offline, and there were additional water use restrictions. And when we talk about water use restrictions, it's always outdoor water use. It's watering. That's the the big impactor. So what's really interesting is now that you have your treatment plant online, you can put those wells back on, or maybe you already have. And the question is, what is that usage going to do? Is it going to go back to where it was in FY17, which has been, pretty stable? This long trend here is from the annual statistical reports that the city and all the other water systems have to send in annually to the Department of Environmental Protection. And then we look at the last, usually the last 3 years of actual metered usage, which is these blue dots. And you can see that the ASR agrees very closely with it, but that's only the last 3 years. Looking back at the last 10 years, you know, yes, you've been experiencing a decrease over that whole period, but it would be less of a decrease than it has been in the last 3 years. So now the reason I drone on about usage is that 80% of your rate revenue is based on usage. So if we overestimate usage, that is going to reflect itself as money that you're waiting for to come in that doesn't come in. And that's not where we want to be. If I underrepresent it, it makes the rate increases need to be more to try to overcome that. And I didn't show the slide here, but there's a very common paradigm I see where a system hasn't changed rates in a long time, and over that time their water use is going down. Not a lot, you know, 1%, 1.5% a year, but at the same time your expenses are going up 2-3% a year. So the net effect is, it's almost like inflation, that every year just standing still, you're losing 4 or 5% of effective revenue. So I want to overcome. So if your usage is going down, say 2% a year, then if you want to increase your revenue by 5%, you actually need to go up 7% to take into account the fact that it's declining on you. So long story short, what we've done, which I think is conservative, is just show that usage staying at where it was in 19 and staying level. I don't think that's what's going to happen. I think it's going to go back to one of those, you know, prior year levels, but frankly, we don't know. And I'd rather be conservative low right now and be surprised, you know, with additional usage, because we just don't know. And I also don't know what your plans are going to be in terms of water use restrictions. And sometimes that's not entirely within your control. So, and the other thing I want to say, we're going to show projections for a 10-year period. And I like to do that for a number of reasons. One, especially if you have something big that's coming, you can kind of plan for it. That's not necessarily, well, you do. You have the treatment plant is going to come online, the debt is going to come online, and that's going to be an impact. But I do expect or recommend that annually we just check in on this, on the usage, I mean, on the projections. So we look at the expenses, you look at the revenue, you look at the usage, and you just sort of check in, and you might, you know, tweak it as you go. So it's not, and to be clear to the board, of course you can take any action you like, but I do not intend for you to be approving, you know, 10 years worth of rates. But we can talk about that when we get there. So that's the water usage. So what we've done is we're leaving it flat, meaning no change based on that last year's data. We are increasing the customer base by about 29 accounts per year, which is what we saw over the past, because it is sort of slowly growing in residential use. So now the way we evaluate rates is we use what's called a pro forma, which is really just a simple cash flow. We use a spreadsheet model to develop the pro forma, and we use a fairly simplified checkbook approach. You have your revenue in and your revenue in, your expenses out, and we look at the fund balance or the retained earnings as a result of that. And we develop the top part of the pro forma, where it's showing here, is the expenses. We base those on reviewing your past history, your expense history, your budgets and your actuals for the last 5 years. We start the projections. All the projections are linear, and the starting point is your FY21 budget, which is the one we had when we started. And then we go up from there based on a, well, you can see right here, it's basically 3.5% is what we use for escalator for expenses. And then down here, we have the capital expenses is your existing debt service, your capital outlay, which is budget capital, and then new debt services, new projects that'll be funded by debt. Now this, the expense side stays the same for each of the three alternatives that we evaluate, because there was no reason to change it. You know, if we had a different alternative CIP or something like that, sometimes we do that. But for this case, and for most cases, it's the same expenses for the three different revenue scenarios. Below here, I show the capital improvement plan from that we got mostly from the 5-year CIP, plus the treatment plant here. So that's the big cost here. And we're showing that that's going to start, the debt will hit the enterprise in 2020 or fiscal 23. And the rest of them are split 23, 24, 25. These are some distribution system improvements. They're all debt funded, and you know, they're coming into the different years as shown, each with a 20-year term. Pretty basic stuff. And you know, based on this, it looks like the water department's on top of their system maintenance, because it's not a huge list. Oh, and I went backwards again. So now this is the second half, and I just can't fit it on one screen very easily, or if I did, you wouldn't be happy watching it. So picture that prior screen, the expenses are right on top of this, right above this. Now this is the revenue portion. So what we look at is the rate revenue is based on that projected usage, which is why that's important. And it's based on the rate structure that we're evaluating. And I'll show you that in a minute. And then below is the non-rate revenue, which is pretty much everything else that doesn't, it's not directly a result of people paying their current year's or the current quarter's water bill. So that includes some miscellaneous for fees and tie-ins and stuff like that. That's about 250. The rest is what we call liens, penalties, and prior year. It's just the other part of the revenue, everything that comes in through the treasurer's office. And then we look at the net revenue is the difference between your expenses and your revenues. And then the fund balance, we start fund balance with the retained earnings for the most recent year, and then we just estimate based on the net revenue change. Now, one thing, Joanna, I just want to point out is that unexpended revenue is around 20% every year. So we incorporated that into the net revenue calculation, meaning that the city's been conservative with their budgeting, and the actual expenses have been, you know, roughly 20% less than that. So it's one of those conundrums where if I budget based on actual expenses, then it's going to look like your budget's actually higher. We don't have enough rate revenue to cover it. Or if I go the other way and there's that delta, it looks like we're, you know, adding more rate increases that we need to. So the reason I do it is, or the way I handled it here was just to add on that 20%. So that is consistent, kind of keeps your fund balance. We talked about this a little bit before. It looks like it's, you know, where we'd expect it to be. Now, when I talk about rate structures, I'm going to skip forward 1 second. Oop. This is the sum of different fees that make up your rate structure the way it is now. And these are base charges for different meter sizes, and then one usage or consumption charge. So this vertical slice here for FY22, say, I call that the rate structure. And that means it's a certain setup. We'll show you when we get into the other ones that this is how we're going to base all the water bills on. And then across, we make adjustments to the rate structure. And I'm just going to pop back. We make adjustments by applying one uniform percentage increase across that whole line of charges and fees and whatnot to maintain this fund balance. So that's how, you know, if it looks like this line, this gold line is your fund balance. The number inside is expressed as a percent of operating expenses. And we use a rule of thumb of 20% or more. That's roughly 2 months revenue, which is a rule of thumb in terms of the water industry for what you should keep. So that's how we set the rates. So when we go to the other alternatives, that rate structure for the first year for FY22 is going to be slightly different. And then from there, it all goes up and down by the percentages that are shown. So that is the rates. And I don't have one slide with them all on it at once. I can pop back, or actually you have this as well. But the FY22 is what we're talking about here. And that's why there's generally not a rate increase for the first year, or for the first one, because we're changing that structure. The alternate B is a modified base charge. And what we did there, again, I'm going to just jump ahead for a second, is this is a little bit in the weeds, so I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time, but the city already uses an incremental base charge based on the size of the meter. And that is very much supported by the industry. And the, you know, the rate manual is a big, thick manual for by the AWWA, would suggest that you use what they call the meter equivalents to raise those rates, or to increase those rates. And you can see here that under their scenario, a 3-inch meter would be charged 15 times the amount of a 5/8 inch meter. The city had an incremental rate structure, which is great. They were a little less, or well, actually quite a bit less than the recommended, or the potentially recommended AWWA values. And we just sort of rounded them up and off and kind of made them more consistent. Of late, we've been looking at this and being a little more conservative than what the AWWA amount would let you be, meaning that instead of charging 25 times for a 4-inch service, we're charging about 4 times. And at the end, I have some comparisons for some bigger customers, and we can look at it. And the thought is that not to hit rate shock, you know, that to just hit them with this really big fee going forward. And again, the whole thing is a balance. And believe it or not, in the manual itself, it says something to the effect of the right rate structure is the one that works for the community. You know, it's not as carved in stone as people might suggest. So it's a matter of kind of looking at your composition of your users and, you know, what works for that system and that community. So just to jump back. So that is the only thing that's different, is we modified those base charges and we left the usage the same and just escalate that with everything else. So here you see there's only 2 relatively small rate increases, and that maintains the fund balance going forward. You know, and you'll notice a couple, you know, 19, 18, it's close enough. You know, you could put a little, you know, 1% increase on that year if you wanted to just kind of round it off, but it's close enough and it accomplishes the goal. You'll also note that these 3 scenarios they're not exactly the same in terms of the amount of revenue they raise and the amount of retained earnings you get. So that's just a vagary of the math. It's hard to get them to be exactly the same. Now, alternate C, we used the same base charges, and now we added tiers. So usage tiers, which the concept is opposite to sort of like a Costco, where the more you buy, the cheaper it is per unit. Tiered usage is the opposite, where the more water you use, the higher the cost gets per increment as you go. And that's really designed two ways. It's designed to encourage water use, conservation, and it's also to reflect the fact that bigger users have more of an impact on a system, or more potential to impact the system. So it's shifting some of the costs towards those larger users, because those are the ones that put the most demand on the system and on the the people that operate the system. It's not the the houses, it's the bigger users that can impact you operationally. So when we look at tiers, what we looked at was, we looked at your summer use, the winter use, residential, non-residential, and we use a combination, what we call serving size, which is based on a residential usage. I don't have it up, but you are like 90% residential, at least. Most systems outside of a big urban area are vastly residential. So when I say serving size, what we've done is we base it on how much water in this case, we're looking at a 2.5 person household at different usages. This is not how we set them per se, but this is just to help give people context to water use. So tier 1, the goal is to hit that lower tier of usage, and that's around 50 gallons per day for a 2.5 person household or a 2 person household. And that's a fairly low tier. That's the base usage. The second tier is at 30. So that's quite a bit more usage. You can see here, that's a family of 4, say, using 100 gallons a day. So that's a bigger usage. And then the rest, everything else goes into that third tier. And when we look at setting tiered rates, there's 2 components. This part, which is the volumes, and the next part is the price increment, which we show here. And the way that we structure this is the first tier is the baseline, so that's set at 1, and then tier 2 is priced at a quarter more, so 1.25 times tier 1, and then tier 3 is 1.75 times tier 1. And again, there's not a hard and fast rule to that. It's more of just balancing between the starting point for the rates. So you'll notice here, and I'm sorry, there's a lot of numbers to go through here, but this is the FY22, the first year of the proposed rates. So we maintain basically this same structure here we did for the base charges. Then we got to the consumption. It was $4.33 for everybody in the existing rate structure. We could actually, because of the way the price increments go, we base that first tier at less, at $3.25. And then the tier 2 is $4.07. So you can see, 7 cents is kind of an odd number, but the driver is the 1.25. And, you can't have everything be rounded. So we tend to let the dollar amounts or the actual rate amounts end up just being whatever they are, because it makes it's more explainable and easy to drive using the ratios. So we go from $4.33 for all the usage to $4 for that middle tier, and then $5.69 for the higher tier. So you're sort of shifting, you have the opportunity to pay a little bit less for the lower users, and for people using in that third tier, they pay a little bit more. And then those are just the volumes that we just talked about. These are in 1,000 gallons or kgals. Looking at the user costs, which is, arguably the most important thing, we look at a family of 4 using, actually, this is, I just noticed that's a typo. It's 50 gallons per day. And we calculate what their annual cost would be based on that. And we show the annual cost going as an increase, as just the actual annual cost, and then a total for the whole period. And the total really doesn't have any function other than it's a very quick way to understand which is the best option for a residential user. So we have the alternative A, we stay with the existing rate structure. Alternative B, we go with the modified base charge, which we've shown, and then C is the base charge plus the tiers. And again, to jump right to the end here, the total would be $7,400, and that's, like I said, that's 10 years of cost. So no one's gonna pay that, but it's a good way to evaluate them. Alternative B for that user would be $66.99 or less, and then alternative C would be $6,900. So it's still a little bit more, and that's, it's hard to make it come out to actually be less all the time. So we can look at the bigger users to see what that does. And we could also, I guess, try to refine that if we wanted to. The next thing we looked at was your top 10 users, because I don't want there to be a surprise if you went to go with the tiered rate structure. What happens to the bigger users? You can see what happens to the residential user. So we looked at, literally, these are the top 10 users, and we looked at summer and winter. This was based on the summer usage, which is the higher, but then I've showed each quarter here of their usage for the year. And then you'd see how, if we were to break it into tiered usage, the cost for the tiered usage rate for one quarter, for this first quarter, is in the blue, and the existing rate structure, alternative A, is in the orange. And I based them both on FY24 because the rates are kind of established at that point, and it's somewhat arbitrary, but it's not the first year and it's not the last year. So, we're looking at Westfield State, Home Depot Distribution Center, some restaurants. The Westwood restaurant, it's not just a restaurant, it's in a big giant building, but I wasn't sure what that was called. So long story short, if you look at the percentage increase for all of these, they're about 20% increase for a quarterly bill. So,
Mr. Chair, may I ask a question to the chair? Mark Crissati here.
Yep, go ahead, Mark.
I'm sorry, but I believe he just explained that opposite what's written here.
ooh,
So what's written here is the tiered rate,
yeah,
which
you
would
are
be
correct.
what's proposed, is in orange, and existing is in blue. Is that not correct?
it is actually, I'm sorry, it's 100% opposite. I missed the, when I was typing it in, I got backwards. I'll change that when I send it for the minutes. So yes, good catch. The orange is the existing rate structure, and the blue is the proposed rates. Or the,
Thank you very much.
Actually, not the proposed, but the alternative C rates.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for clarifying
Oh.
that, Mark.
Yeah, thank you. And then the next thing and last thing we look at is the affordability for residential users in terms of cost impact. And the way that we do that is rather than, make any judgments or getting into the how much pizza costs and cell phones and all that thing, we look at the two industry standards that are used in the water industry. One is the residential indicator. If anybody's ever heard of the 2% of median household income, that comes from the sewer separation days. And I leave it in here because many people, if they've ever heard of anything, have heard of that. It's considered to be outdated. because the median is not a good indicator of household burden. And even said that we've taken the cost through that 10-year period without escalating that median household income, and we end up at a 1.3 or a 1.2. So that says, according to the methodology, that that is not considered to be a financial burden. It would have to get up to 2 for it to be a financial burden. Then in 2019, a more granular, more friendly, I don't want to say friendly, but a approach that's more sensitive to the more economically impacted people was developed. And that's based on the lowest quintile income instead of the median, which is the lowest 20% in your community. And it also uses this poverty prevalence indicator, which is the percent of the community that is at 200% of the federal poverty level or below. And you take the two and you come in, you enter this chart with the poverty prevalence indicator. And then you come in on this way with the household burden indicator, which is the same annual cost of water and sewer in this case, divided by that 20th percentile. The residential indicator only looks at the cost of water. So if we look at Westfield, your poverty prevalence indicator is 23%. So you're in this middle. And as far as the household burden indicator goes, anything less than 7 is going to be in this one category. And again, without escalating the lowest quintile, we see that at the end of the period, it gets up to 4.5% or almost 5. This is a simplified rubric, so it only has 3 categories and 3 categories. What this is really saying, in a way, is that no matter what you did, to a large degree, you would be in this moderate to low burden, no matter what, right? Because you'd have to get over 7% to even click into the next category. So, you know, I present this because it gives you the best indicator we have as far as financial burden goes. And I think it's more meaningful than looking at, you know, what the town next to you pays for water, because that is, you know, varies quite a bit based on what your situation is. So that is the end of the presentation. And I can open it up to questions to see if anybody, you know, if you have any questions or if you want to go back to anything else, or we can, you know, dive into more detail if you want. So I am gonna try this.
I think we're all good in our audience.
I would leave.
No, oh, no, but we don't have questions right here.
No, I don't think so. I think, Mike, with a tiered system, do you end up with an unintended consequence where people conserve, and especially with the meters that we have and their ability to, you know, have more control probably over anything in their household, is water usage, and that some of those numbers go down of the high users?
That's a great question. And I'll turn it around. The state is actively engaging with systems to start to regulate the registered volumes, that the part that was in place before the Water Management Act. And, you know, you have water use restrictions now, and they're either calendar based or stream flow based. And I would love to see communities be able to use rates, you know, whether it's drought rates or, you know, tiered rates, to control that themselves without having to issue water use restrictions, right? And because a water use restriction, it kinks the curve. It's putting a muzzle on it. You don't know what people would have used or what they wanted to use. So if we were going to use that instead of water use restrictions, we were going to use rates, that would then, you'd want to take reverse what you just said, that unintentional consequence, and make it intentional and say, okay, how much do I have to raise that third tier until I curtail that water use to where we need it to be? And I'll be transparent with you. I've researched this a lot, and you either get like fingers and toes, or you get, you know, somebody with a PhD in economics with, you know, integrals and stuff. It's really hard. So what they generally say, that concept is called price elasticity. It's the change in demand versus the change in price. And generally speaking, water use is considered to be inelastic, certainly for the first two tiers, if you will. And I don't mean the tiers, the volumes that we set. In my mind, I think of, you know, tier 1 is minimal basic indoor use. Tier 2 is the same thing, but for maybe a bigger household. Tier 3 is when you get into what they call discretionary use, where it's watering your grass, it's, you know, that kind of thing. So people do have control over that. What I've read for a rule of thumb is a 10% increase in rate might result in a 1% decrease in demand. But it's, I want to know that answer, because I'd love to put forth and have, instead of water use restrictions, you drive into town and you see a flashing message board that says drought rates in effect, and people know what that means. They say, oh boy, you know, we're either I'm not gonna water the grass, or we're having my son's wedding here in September and I want a green lawn, you know? So it's, you know, let them make that decision. But it's not, from the communities I've talked to that raised rates a lot and saw a change in demand, they said it doesn't last. People kind of revert back to the, you know, and your water rates are not crazy high anyway. So yeah, they're, you know, that $700-800 is not, you know, fairly average.
Mike, do you have data on what percentage of residential users fall within each tier?
Question, yeah.
I do.
Because that forecast, Mike, assumed that they all fell into the lowest tier, right? The 50 gallon a day household.
It's your usage. Let me just see.
And that's what I thought. I mean, that's how I interpreted that. I wasn't sure.
No, if you used, just trying to think what's the best thing to show here.
I think Joe's question is spot on, because that would help you model the kind of where, to your point of elasticity, where it would start to make a difference.
So this is the data, the actual, you know, the not the raw data, but the process data. This is not the rate model, but this is the distribution or usage analysis. So what it's really saying is, if you used, you know, 4,000 gallons, that first, I'm sorry, 40,000 gallons, the first would be in 8,000, then the next would be 12,000, and then the rest would be in that third tier. So it breaks down as you use more, you go into higher tiers, and that part of the usage gets charged at that rate, versus that, you know, the first tier always stays the same. Let me show you this. It's a little messier, but it kind of gets to it. This is just the back data for that top 10 users. So I took their total usage and I broke it down into the tiers. So everybody, they're all above tier 1. So everybody has a tier 1 cost of 8,000 gallons. The tier 2 is all 22,000 because they're more than the two combined. And then what's left goes into that third tier. So for a residential user, when I was looking at that, this is just, again, this is side math. This is me looking at the typical residential user, their cost for the base fee and then usage fee under that existing rate structure. And then under the tier, this is the base fee, and then tier 1, tier 2, tier 3. And I just wanted to see how that looked. And it actually came out a little cheaper with the alternative C. So
And so when you say that, what size household or what size, like where did that fall in from a usage?
yeah, okay, I get you. I'm sorry. I understand your question now. This is a contrived user. It's based on 50 gallons a day times
Right.
4 users. So that's not,
Yeah, I'm gonna step in here for a second, Mike. This is William Time Bond. I think the number we used is 80 gallons per day per user for a family size of 4, because based on the 2019 ASR data we got, the estimated daily consumption per person is around 76. So we went a little higher, and then we went a little higher for the family size as well, just to be conservative.
yep, okay, I stand corrected.
So the 80 a day was the average, kind of the center cut of, call it the median of a Westfield household.
It was what was reported on the ASR, which is taking the residential usage and dividing it by the population served, which
Yep.
is not always the same.
Right. Okay. I think, Joe, I think that does answer kind of the question. I think we're both dancing around the same thing, that revenue forecast may be a little bit low, depending on how the rate was structured. But I guess that's what we're saying, Michael, that might be
right.
lower than we would expect, or lower than we would actually realize. And Fran, I think your question's right. At what point does the rate become a deterrent that you have to then adjust your financial modeling to recover that, to get to the revenue target you need?
Right, and I also think on some of those bigger users, some of those are large tracts of land in that trailer park for one. I wouldn't be surprised if they actually have leaks in there, and at the current rate, it's, maybe not so,
They don't care.
entertaining to go look for the leaks, but when they're paying more, maybe make them say, hey, let's go fix the leaks here.
That incentivizes them.
Yeah, exactly.
Yep.
Michael, I had a question about option A. What did you use as your gallon usage? So as we saw in the first chart, we've had a tail off since 2014-ish by the looks of it. What did you end up using for your modeling to forecast the revenue at those? I mean, what did you end up using to forecast out those years, a few years, from a revenue standpoint?
So we used let me just go back to this. So FY20 was based on the same value that we had for
18.
Yeah, actually 19, and we just assumed it would keep going. I'm pretty sure it's going to rise up more than that.
So we would expect, I mean, I asked the group, Fran or Steve, I'm curious what caused that drop off from 13 into 14 that looks like it stabilized at that level. And then obviously I think we would all probably believe that, our water restrictions in 17 through 19 caused that downward trend again. But I'd be curious to know what happened in 13. But I mean, I don't know, maybe we forecast out as an average of 17 through 19 and see if that, again, because it may be more conservative to do that, but I think we have to be realistic about what we think water's going to do from a usage standpoint.
So kind of based on the ASR data, it seems that in FY 13 and 14, the surface water source went offline. So I'm not sure if that reduced the supply available.
Yeah, that's a real good point. Yeah.
Great point. No,
And-
yep,
Oh, 14 was a wet year and 16 was a dry year.
Yeah.
point. Yeah, that's when we put in the raw water main. I don't know. I mean, it's hard to predict what future usage is going to be, but clearly, if we were all good prognosticators, we could set a rate that would get us to the revenue we need. But that's the crystal ball we really need to buy.
And the the increases are not crazy either. You're not really, it's because it's right here, right? So if we look at this, minus the rate increases and all that, your expenses aren't going up that crazy. You know what I mean? Like you have a pretty stable enterprise here. So the big thing the only thing that's coming on is this debt cost here. And you can tell just by the size of the bars, frankly, that it's not a crazy amount of money. So that puts you, if you want to feel good about something, we can show you all the other communities we work for. They're like, wow, that's a big increase. So you're, it's not, these are not killer rate increases. If the usage goes up more than we thought, then yeah, you might find yourself in that second year not needing to increase it. The reason why I didn't want to go higher with the usage is, one, I'm not exactly sure what you're going to do with your water use restrictions. The plant's just coming online or is just online. So, the most conservative thing is to say it's going to start where it is. And, we could increase this. One of the challenges with using linear projections is if we say it's going to go up 2%, well, it just keeps going the whole way. I thought about, starting from like this point here and looking at that, but I don't know. I don't want to go too far away from the data that we have.
Right. I mean, guys, I think, and department, I think that last chart certainly puts, that's the bar chart, Michael. It really makes a stark point because of the increasing debt service, and we all know what we've done over the last 2-3 years from a project standpoint, and what with 1 and 2, going before, to be worked on. I think that's, to me, is the stark reality of this is the debt service is what's really dry. I mean, we've done a really good job, to your point, Michael, of managing cost and within the department, but the issues are we've had to really change infrastructure to address the PFAS issues, and that's not free.
No, but at the same time, you've done the $13 million plant, the debt service is around 700,000. So, compared to a $6 million budget, it's not a dramatic change. This is, I have to be careful. I hate to ever say, oh, you can afford this or you can afford that. All I can say is that based on a lot of other systems that we've looked at, this is, in my opinion, entirely manageable. It's not a drastic increase. You've done a good job of keeping your expenses in check. And if your usage goes up, that's going to make it even easier. I'm sorry, was that a question?
I was just asking my colleague next to me the question.
For some reason, when I have the screen share on, I can't see you guys.
To the chair.
Go ahead.
So Mark Rosati here, was that a go ahead to me?
Yeah, go ahead, Mark.
Thank you. Look, first of all, I would be interested, or I would suggest that the commission be interested in asking what the consultant's recommendation is. He certainly laid out a lot of numbers and a lot of paths. He's obviously wrestled with the ins and outs of the rate increases and the nuances of the system and the users of the water department, the Westfield water system. I would suggest that the commission be interested in what he had to say as far as a recommendation. Short of that, I would reiterate to the commission something I have said for a decade plus, in that, look, in my short 30 years with the city, I have seen the Water Commission go through a period of time, 10 years of not raising rates, 10 years, not raising rates, and then finding themselves short and wanting to raise the rates 30%. Well, if they had raised it 3% over those 10 years, they would have been there. But wanting to raise it at 30% all at once, there was such a political backlash that the commission then backed off and only raised it 15. And you're living with the the fallback of that today. Is that, look, a modest, reasonable adjustment annually. And you can always, look at and say, well, okay, well, maybe we don't need all of that this year, but a modest annual increase annually is expected by a consumer who expects, inflation and so forth. And the commission, the last thing you want to be finding yourself is in a position of not having sufficient revenues to address issues. And understand that one of those issues is investing in the system. It's not just maintaining the system, keeping the water flowing, keeping it clean. You have to invest in the system for tomorrow. That's part of your fiduciary responsibility, not just keeping the rate as low as possible. It's about setting your system up to address tomorrow's needs. It's so, as was presented in the slides, I would recommend to the commission to take a look at that 3% per annum increase to get you to a point of being comfortable. And I understand that the usage may even be more than what's anticipated, but that's an enviable position for the commission to be in, to have too many revenues than you really need and say, oh, okay, well, we can back off. But that you don't want to be is, oh, geez, we just increased rates and, oh, well, now we got to raise them even higher because we didn't anticipate it enough. Go to the point of trying to be secure and safe for tomorrow. And I'm sorry, and I appreciate your time. Thank you.
If I can just comment on that, the very interesting thing about this is it's Massachusetts, so there's like 200 something water systems and there's 300 different ways to do things, but there's some trends that we see that are really, really common. The most common one is, to hear what you just said, sir, was the, all those guys before us, they never raised rates, they never did this. And that's very common to see. Having said that, all of these structures have some measured increases in them. And especially, and I keep losing, I'm having trouble with, oh, there we go. Let me just share again. So we are looking at, continuous increases. And for some reason, I agree with what you said about, costs go up and consumers expect it and all that. Some reason when you get to water and sewer systems, people seem to look at it as discretionary spending, like it's an option. And I'm glad that I haven't seen that here. And, you know, these rate structures all maintain a balance that you want to see. And, you know, one of the things you notice as you tweak them more, they generally require, you know, less adjustment. So this third one only requires a 2% a year. And that's just to, you know, kind of keep up with the price increases as you go. So I was happy to see that you weren't, you know, another sign that that you haven't been doing a good job is that your existing debt would be really, really low. And that's not the case. You have a reasonable amount of debt, and you know, the new debt really isn't that much of an increment. And
I
you
would
asked me-
suggest,
sorry.
I'm sorry, to the chair again, I would suggest that, look, what you're working with in your model for capital improvements is only a 5-year window. And you're going beyond the 5 years. So, I mean, you
Fair point.
should understand that there's going to be more capital improvements, and there's obviously more need for capital improvements than have been identified. So certainly, I would suggest you err on the side of comfort or safety or security relative to revenues, and have sufficient funds to address the needs of the future. Thank you. Sorry.
No, Mark, and I was gonna say it before too, there's no need to apologize. You know, your input is greatly valued. And I personally am of the same mindset. You know, it would be great for the department to have sufficient revenues so that they can stay ahead of infrastructure improvements, you know, in preventing the excessive Band-Aid repairs. You know, Band-Aid repairs over time cost the city more money, which in turn will deplete operating revenues and, you know, take away from future improvements in repairs that are planned in a capital improvements plan or whatever it may be to get done. So, no, your input is greatly valued, and thank you for you know, bringing it to our attention.
And that's
Thank you.
another point why I don't want to see you, you know, this is just an illustration, and that's a good point about the 5-year capital. As more picks up, what you'll see is, you know, next year we'll look at it and say, oh, okay, this, you know, revenue was up, usage was up, or whatever, revenue was down, expenses were down. And then as you start to get into like year 3 or 4, the city's going to be thinking about the next 5 years and what that looks like. And that may change these last 5 years recommendations, you know.
So Mike, going back to Mark's point, I guess of the 3 options, you know, which, you know, do you and Ty and Bond have a recommendation at this time, or is that something that, you know, the city is going to present at a later meeting?
You know, it's not just based on the residential usage or the residential cost impacts. You could go with B or C, and you know, B is what, $200 cheaper over 8 years, so it's marginally less expensive. One of the things I like about having a tiered rate, if you said that you wanted to stay, you know, say you wanted to go, you didn't want to go with you wanted to do B, but you still wanted tiered rates, you can set that increment to be 1 across the board or very close to it, and then have the ability to change that over time as your situation changes if you want. Meaning that, you know, if you're going to a tiered usage for the first time and you have, say, for example, a community that was going to metered use for the first time, you don't want to jump into that if you're not sure what the usage patterns are. So sometimes we'll set them very close where tier 1, 2, and 3 almost cost the same, but you have them. And then as you go, you can increase the price tier between them to get the effects that you want. So I'd be okay with B, frankly. I think it still worked. It wasn't much of a change. Your rates generally work. You don't have a, you know, a crazy impact, and you would be impacting the big water users less.
thank you very much. Are there any other questions before we move on?
To the chair, if I may, Mark Crissati, one more comment.
Yep, go ahead, Mark.
And I apologize for taking up so much of your time, but if I could emphasize again, look, in my tenure, I have come to appreciate truism that is all change is bad. And so if I would strongly recommend the commission set itself upon a course of action that is consistent over time of a rate increase over multiple years, and just allow the consumer then to expect what tomorrow is going to be. You can always step back from it. It's stepping forward or changing things to the adverse that then has negative public impact. So again, I would recommend the commission look at, again, a consistent increase over time. Again, consistent over time that is just expected. It's not change, it's just carrying forward with the same incremental increase over time. And then look like a hero and cut back when it's excessive. But it just, again, all change is bad, and it's a political environment we live in. So thank you, and I'm sorry. Thank you.
No, again, no need to apologize, Mark. We appreciate it. We appreciate your experience and your advice.
Mr. Chairman, on that same token, I do these meetings where people ask a lot of questions and back and forth, and people will say, wow, that was really tough. And I go, no, that was great. They ask questions, they're paying attention, they're invested, they're engaged. I mean, that's what this is for. So I appreciate the questions as well.
Yep, no, Mike and Will and Jen, we appreciate, everyone giving the presentation and going through this process. I'm assuming the department's going to come up with something that they, are going to recommend to us or propose to us at some point.
As far as an option,
Yes.
Yeah.
yeah, we definitely can do that.
Okay.
If I may, Joe, the other thing when I said, the informed decision-making, this whole project was done on an accelerated basis to make this meeting. And I don't personally like to feel like I'm keel hauling a board where I'm just presenting a lot of data, like, okay, what do you want to do? What do you want to do? So you guys have any questions, over the next couple of days or whatever, feel free to push them through the city and, get back to us or whatever we can. I want to make sure you're comfortable in the decisions you're making and not feel like I'm railroading something through you.
No, we appreciate that, Mike. And yeah, it'll be nice to digest this a little offline after seeing the presentation and get some of the questions answered. Yeah, then we can write, Ron or John, if we have any questions, we've got Mike's email through that thread earlier. We can kick them over to the city and get them answered.
All right, and I want to thank Michael and your team. This is a very comprehensive look, more than we've done in the past, and I think it certainly presents a defendable case as to why a need for rate, I wouldn't say increase, but rate adjustment needs to be considered, certainly from kind of our cash flow and the debt service commitments we're going to have going forward. So thank you.
All right, Mike, Will, and Jen, thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks, folks.
Appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, everyone. Bye.
Thank you again for your input. It's much appreciated.
Thank you. Good night.
All right, moving on to the agenda. We've got a few utility lien abatements, 86 Court Street, 91 West Silver Street, and 115 West Silver Street.
So Bay State Noble Hospital contacted me about a month or two ago. Their last quarter utility bill got linked to their third quarter real estate tax. So they contacted me to see if it was possible to have the interest removed from the real estate bills. I have checked with the collector, the bills have been paid, the ones that were liened, so all that's remaining is the interest on the account. So these letters are just presented to you, so you can make the decision to approve or deny the interest, removal.
Are they all 3 properties?
Yeah, so of
Oh, I see. Okay.
yeah, so there's 3 separate properties that had 3 bills liened. One is 115 West Silver, which I think is one of the main buildings on the property. 91 West Silver and 86 Court Street. Yep, yeah, they started to purchase some property around the hospital. So 91 West Silver Street is one of those residential properties.
Gotcha. Did they provide a reason for the late payments, or is it just?
These bills were issued during COVID, during the pandemic. So I think the bills just went unattended. So they weren't paid on time, so they were liens. They were the only bills that were liened to the real estate.
Yeah, and besides that, they've been in good standing.
Yep.
Okay. Ron or John, do either of you have any questions or concerns about these?
I have no objection. To your point, they've been in good standing. They're certainly central to the, health and welfare, and, through the pandemic, they've been definitely, so I have absolutely no objection to abating the interest.
I'm with you there, Ron, that obviously they had a lot to deal with this past year, and for the dollar amount that we're talking about here, based on what else they had to deal with, I don't have issue with it.
Okay, I agree. Do I hear a motion?
Hannah, can we deal with all of these at once, or they have to be dealt with separately?
The Board of Assessors appreciates it if they're done individually, because they have to vote on it as well.
So we need to state the dollar amount for each property.
Yes.
Would you mind reviewing those?
91 West Silver Street is going to be $15.60. 86 Court Street is $4.76. And 115 West Silver is $1,796.29.
Okay.
And Hannah, that $1,700 or $1,800 one, that was all interest.
Correct. Yep.
Wow. Okay.
That must be the main structure,
Yeah.
itself, yeah, okay. All right, well, I'll make a motion to abate the lien at 86 Court Street in the amount of $4.76.
I second.
Roll call, Commissioner Cole,
Yes.
Commissioner Odelski,
Yes.
Commissioner Papalarczyk, yes.
I make a motion to abate the lien related to 91 West Silver Street in the amount of $15.60.
I second.
Roll call, Commissioner Cole,
Yes.
Commissioner Odelski,
Yes.
Commissioner Papalarczyk, yes.
I make a motion to abate the $1,796.29 interest related to the property at 115 West Silver Street.
I second.
Roll call, Commissioner Cole,
Yes.
Commissioner Odelski,
Yes.
Commissioner Papalarczyk, yes. Thank you, John, for doing that. And thank you, Hannah, for the explanations.
You're welcome.
Next item on the agenda, approval of water abatement and refund policy.
So I forwarded you a new copy based off of the discussion from our last meeting. There's 2 items added to the policy. One was giving the residents a 10-year limit per abatement, but giving the commission an option to waive that depending on the extenuating circumstances. And the second item was that the department would handle the abatements, but all final approval would go through the commission.
So Hannah, the only adjustments you made were those two highlighted?
Correct, yep.
Yeah, I think this is fine by me. Thank you for highlighting the changes, Hannah. It makes it much easier to track what's changed.
Yeah, I have no objections.
Same here. I'm fine with them as written.
All right, do I hear a motion to accept the revised water abatement refund policy?
Sure. I make a motion to accept water abatement refund, water abatement policy as written on notes presented at 4/20 or 4/21, 2021.
I second.
Roll call, Commissioner Cole,
Yes.
Commissioner Nadrowski,
Yes.
Commissioner Papalarzik, yes.
And actually, Hannah, strike the 21. It should be 4/20.
Okay, we're fine.
All right, thank you. Next item is approval of the March 3rd, 2021 minutes.
I read them earlier. I didn't have any exception to them.
I just had one question related to the well two results that were discussed during the last meeting. I just wanted to confirm that the way the notes are written, that the issues we discussed, where we're still in the process of validating some of the data that were collected, were only associated with well two.
Yes, I believe that is correct.
And that was my understanding too. So I think before these are approved, it may be worth just revising the way it's presented there so it's more clear if somebody reads that in the future.
I can have Heather look at it just to verify and make the changes.
And that was really my only my issue I had with the note. So otherwise, I think everything else is fine.
I agree with John as well. I read it and it mentions Owen District Road as well. And it was just a little unclear on where the samples that the city's having issues with or there are discrepancies with were taken.
Two.
Heather, could you-
More of an issue with the results of two.
Well, yes, as well as those, yes.
Okay. Yeah, I'll have Heather look at these just to verify and I'll change them for next meeting.
Okay, yeah, it's a small change, would be great.
Thanks, Hannah.
You're welcome.
Yeah, thank you very much. All right, so we'll revisit those next meeting. Department project updates.
Apologize that you guys didn't get an email to you. Heather was out today. I usually work on them with her, but I can get them over to you. So she'll be in tomorrow. I'll get them over to you. But we can discuss whatever you guys have on your mind as far as updates go. One, we can say the flashboards are in, so that's, and their water going over at the res. Well, two, as you know, it's not offline, we're running Owen instead. The last, if I recall, like around 85 million gallons produced out of there. East Mountain Tank is just about complete. It's obviously the old one is demolished, as you guys know, and we've been working on the site work up there, so I went up there today, it's all leveled out and we got grass planted. Working on a curtain drain down at that spring, they encounter down at the bottom. As soon as they straighten that out, we'll pave the road. And, other than that, it's about it for now.
So Steve, even with as dry as it's been in March, and obviously we're in April now, but we're still running over the top of flashboard, huh? At the
And we
reservoir.
put them in run last week when we could safely get in there and install them. And I think the day or the day after, it rained and it was a good push, and now it's gone over the board, so.
Oh, that's great.
Oh, yeah, we had almost 2 inches of rain last week, so.
Punch tomorrow too.
Yeah, so it was just perfect timing.
Yeah. And I'm assuming that the new tank at East Mountain is now holding water. We've got water in it. Is that correct?
Oh, it has been for months.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
We need that, right? Yeah. Those are all my questions, Joe.
I can't remember where we left this last with water restrictions. There's still a water restriction in place. Correct?
They're still in place.
They're still in place.
Okay. Is that something we want to discuss next meeting? I guess I don't know, the local comfort with early spring watering.
We can discuss it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I think with 7 and 8, you got a much more robust, in operation, you have a much more robust scenario than you had with just 2, depending solely upon that. So, I think that, weighing that into consideration, I think, I think we should be good.
Yeah, I agree that with the information that the flashboards have been in the reservoir is full. It can be even something that we address month to month as needed, or, the department can bring to our attention that there's some concern, but I think, with 7 and 8 online and the reservoir full, it might be worth, removing the restriction. If we want to talk about that next meeting, that would be great.
Yep.
I'll put on the agenda.
Thank you. Is 7 and 8 still operating only when staffed, or is the SCADA system?
Yes, it's only running with the person in the seat.
Okay.
Right.
Is there an update of how much longer before the department thinks the SCADA system the bugs will be worked out and it'll be able to run auto?
PRVs is the biggest. Yeah. Well, we have pretty good reliance, a trust in all of that. We do want to, it has some rupture disc on it. And we want to change those out to PRVs, just because of the catastrophic, nature of a rupture disc when it goes. So the PRVs, are on order, and, I think that's kind of, once we do that, it's not a huge lift to do. We just need to get it all in place and then put it together. It's pretty, a few 4-bolt flanges, and you've had the PRVs, and then those just daylight to the outside. So if you have a failure, that water goes outside of the building. And we don't have rupture disc at any of our other facilities. And and we've experienced firsthand with a rupture disc early on, and the comfort level's not there with those.
Okay. Yeah, I've never even heard of a rupture disc.
It's not like they didn't perform, but it's just the nature of a rupture disc when it goes and how it goes.
It sounds very violent.
Yeah, and
the Google description also makes it seem very violent.
The relief valves, the event passes, they'll reset. Even if they kept lifting, it's going to be, so.
Yeah, little spring resets inside of them.
Yeah, so.
Yep.
I would imagine by next month we'll have that squared away.
Okay, that's awesome. One last question, is that something the city's going to take on themselves, or is the contractor still on site?
We're going to take it upon ourselves.
Awesome. Okay.
And do you know, in order to go unmanned there, I know you're working out the kinks with the SCADA, Are there other requirements that need to be satisfied through Mass DEP?
No,
No, DEP approved.
they've approved it, they've site visited, you know, they've seen it, so they're comfortable with what we have, and we're comfortable as well. I mean, operators have been there enough. In fact, I was just out there today, you know, you're basically controlling it by SCADA anyways. You're sitting at the
Right.
plant.
The person's just there, right?
That's still, those keystrokes are just the same as if they were happening at Reservoir Road or on a tablet or whatever. So, yeah, we feel good about it.
Yeah, it's great. It's a little bit of a silver lining in my opinion, you know, because that's a large system to have to program, and you guys had all that time
Yeah.
to sit in front of it and watch it do its magic. So it's great. And it's great that it's all set and DEP is on board. That's all great news. Are there any other questions? All right.
My only one, I just have one, Joe.
Oh, sorry, Ron. Yep, go ahead.
Hannah, now that we've been on the metering, you know, the online metering system, have we seen any upside, unintended benefit? I mean, just, is there anything that you can tell the commission of what you've seen as it relates to the metering? And, you know, anecdotally, has it made things better for the department, for you, from a billing side?
Yeah, we have had a couple of accounts that have pretty large leaks that we were able to send somebody out and, actually it's up on Pachasik Road. It's a vacant property, the meter froze, so a lot of water was being pulled, so we sent somebody up right away and they turned off the water at the curb, to stop the leak. So if we hadn't had that, meter on that property, we wouldn't have found that probably weeks, almost a
almost
month
like-
later.
600 gallons.
It was like 600 gallons an hour that was running through the meter.
Wow.
Wow.
So we were able to stop it pretty quickly.
That's incredible.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've had a couple of those and we send somebody out right away to start knocking on doors or see if they can find where the leak is so we can stop it well before it becomes an issue.
Yeah. Okay, cool. I mean, I think that's something that goes unnoticed. I mean, obviously we get the things that are noticed that all of a sudden my bill went up, but you know, the on the flip side, the benefit that it's providing to both the system, the city and the residents, I don't think it's stated enough. So, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Ron. Before we adjourn, why don't we look at scheduling our next meeting? Not sure if the consensus is still to meet on the 4th, since that's only a couple weeks away.
Department, I mean, what's your, Fran, Hannah, Steve, what's your point of view? I mean, or do we want to defer until May? I mean, actually, it would be May.
Water rates, I think that's kind of crucial to get that, you know, in motion sooner rather than later. Obviously, there's not a whole lot's going to change between now and the 4th, but should have time enough to digest the information and give a recommendation, and so you guys can do what you need to do.
No, I think that does make sense, Joe. I've forgotten about that.
Yeah, I just don't want it to drag, which it can easily, you know, so I know it's only a couple weeks away, but any questions, we're here, Mike from Time Bond. It's gracious enough to help us.
Yeah, I was even going to suggest the 11th, and then we'll go right back on track. So we'll have 3 weeks and 3 weeks between meetings, but the 4th is fine too. It doesn't matter. You know, doesn't seem to be a whole lot going on.
The 11th works. I mean, that's a little bit more time to digest and
Still gives us leeway.
and then gives you guys, you know, some more items to come up to deal with. And
The only problem is that Public Works meets on the 11th as well, so we might have to meet before at 6.
Yeah.
But let me check the calendar on that.
does the 4th work for everybody, Ron and John?
I can do the 4th.
Actually, the 4th doesn't.
Okay, I was just say, I don't make things more difficult on you, Hannah, unless, we've had a conflict.
No. I can check tomorrow. I can check with the clerk's office.
What'd you say, Ron?
I'm out of town. I will be, I'm actually gonna be on the West Coast, believe it or not.
Oh, so you'll be joining us at 4.
At where?
How far west?
San Diego.
That sounds nice.
It's work though. It's not.
Yeah, work in the sunshine.
Yeah, at least working. Yeah. Nice. Versus Harrisburg, which is where I'm on my way to now.
Yeah, it does. The 11th, does that work for your schedule, Ron?
Yes, for sure.
Okay. The 11th would work for me as well, Hannah. I, if possible, prefer 7, but if 7 doesn't work, then let us know what does, and we'll make.
I can always talk to John Sullivan, and we can always work something out. Which is no problem.
If it's convenient, I don't want to make a big to do.
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Oh.
So yeah, just let us know when works, and we'll meet on the 11th. All right, do I hear a motion to adjourn at 8:36?
I make a motion to adjourn the Board of Water Resource, Board of Water Resource at 8:37 on 4/20.
I second.
Roll call, Commissioner Cole,
Yes.
Commissioner Angelski,
Yes.
Commissioner Papalarzik, yes. Okay,